Good evening, and welcome to this week's episode of Sounds of the Diaspora, Artist to Artist Conversation with yours truly, Dion Parson. It's a real honor and pleasure to have this guest on the show tonight with me, someone that I've known for quite some time, and we've made a lot of music together, and I've enjoyed his career and his music as well. And as a matter of fact, we was hanging out this past weekend, and he's a fellow Gemini, trumpet player, educator, composer, arranger, and someone that I really, really respect. And I'm just so happy that he was able to join us on the show tonight. Welcome, Lee Hogans, to Sounds of the Diaspora.
Hey, Dion. Good to be on. Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Yes. How you doing, man? It's been a minute since I saw you first weekend.
I know. A long, 72, 32, 72, 48 hours, I think, since we last saw each other.
Yeah. Couple of days. We had a good time at your family picnic, and thanks for inviting us, and thanks for the jam session.
No, I really appreciate you guys coming, and we love doing it. People were asking me and my wife, like, when did you guys start hosting and stuff? And this was our third annual one in the house we're in now. But when we lived in Harlem, we used to do it. We had a small backyard, so we fit like 20 people back there. No jam sessions at that time, but we would have the music going. And then prior to that, we were doing it separately. So we love having people over and hosting and just, having a good time, and especially having musicians come and play. And man, when I asked you to play, I thought maybe you'd sit down for like a tune or two and then kind of like go eat or something, but you play for an hour, it was a blessing. It's really a blessing.
It's a lot of fun, man. I enjoy playing. We haven't made music in a while, so we needed to do that, but it was good to play with other musicians, hang out with them, and of course the kids, jumping on the drums and doing their thing. That was a lot of fun too.
You were holding it down, even though you had all these other polyrhythms going on with like 5-year-olds beating on these drums. You were still swinging. So, testament to your musicality.
Yeah. Hey, man, you got to do what you got to do. But it was a lot of fun, man. So, the family enjoyed it. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I really appreciate you guys coming.
Yeah, so I finally got you on the show after talking for a while, to your schedule and everything, and so trumpet player. You went to Rutgers. I went to Rutgers. We have a lot of connections. Melvin Jones introduced us. Sean recommended you and Melvin. And through that connection, we form a really great, not only musical bond, but just a friendship in general. But I know you grew up playing music. You have a brother that plays as well. It's amazing. I got to meet him last year for the year before. For the first time, last year with a big band in St. Thomas. But tell us about your musical upbringing. How did you get started in music?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I come from a family, went to church. My mom was a great singer. She never did it professionally, but she sang in church. She actually, like, when she was in high school, she used to be a part of like a James Brown type review band. So she was singing, she's been singing her whole life. So I think hearing her sing was kind of my first, the first thing I can remember about music. And also my parents would, on Saturdays, when we had to clean the house, Saturdays was the day they would put records on, and we'd listen to the records and we'd help them clean the house. So I remember, since I was probably like 5 years old, just hearing music on Saturdays, a lot of R&B, a lot of funk, and music of that nature, and then having the church music as well and stuff. So, that was kind of my acclimation to like hearing music. I also I had an older brother, passed away about 10 years ago, but he was probably my most influence, or he probably influenced me the most on music, because he was listening to all different types of music. He was, during that time, hip hop had just came around, so he was into that. He was also into rock. He was into, a whole plethora of different, he didn't have like one thing. He was listening to a lot of different music. And then, he would listen to a little bit of jazz as well. And I think that was my first, time really hearing jazz. Although the hip hop I was listening to, they were sampling jazz, so I was hearing all these little like jazz bits that
Yeah.
they came from this artist and that artist and stuff. And I remember like those were the songs that I liked the most, the ones that sampled jazz, because I was hearing something, that struck my ear. But my older brother would really, he really, you know, gave us the opportunity, gave me and my younger brother, who's also a musician, the opportunity to hear music. Um, and so before I played the trumpet, I wanted to be a DJ because I was hearing all this hip hop. I was seeing like these DJs scratching. I was seeing these DJs rocking parties and stuff. So, I'm like a 6, 7 year old, and it was like, I want to do that for a living. You know? And then, fast forward a couple of years later, when I was 10 years old, I had the opportunity to play an instrument in band at my school. I wanted to play the saxophone. Everybody wanted to play saxophone because it had the most keys and it looked the coolest.
Mhm.
But at the time, my parents couldn't afford a saxophone. So they said, well, we have a friend who has a pawn shop and they have this trumpet in this pawn shop. You can play that if you want. It's $50. We'll pick that up. You could play that. So they bought the trumpet for me. And it was the worst. It was like in the worst shape. I actually remember teacher when I was in fifth grade, taking it to the teacher or being in band. And at that time, we had our own instruments. And the teacher was like, "You're never gonna be able to play trumpet with that type of trumpet."
Wow.
And interestingly enough, one of the things that stood out to me about that first kind of like uh, situation was, so my dad being in the army, we moved around a lot. So I'm from, born in Florida. I call Atlanta my home, but in between all that, I was in Colorado, I was in California, and a couple of other places. So at that time, I was in Colorado, so it wasn't a lot of black people. It wasn't a lot of us
Mhm.
who were in Pueblo, Colorado. So happened to be that the band director was black, so I was like, oh, okay, someone who can relate to me. And he gave me like the hardest time out of all the kids. And so I think, thinking back on it, I think, there was a reason. I think he said he was like, hey, there's some potential there. Let me make sure that I am, steering this kid in the right direction. And the way to do that was like making me feel like I had to work hard
Right.
for what I had. So I can appreciate him. I don't remember his name, but I can appreciate that teacher um,
Mhm.
kind of being really, really tough on me because, that steamrolled and I kept playing trumpet. And then when I moved to Atlanta, um, I went to middle school, still was playing trumpet, but then I was like, do I want to continue playing the trumpet or do I want to play basketball? Do I want to be in sports?
Mhm.
Girls like all the guys in the sports. I liked basketball. I wanted to do something different. My band director at the time, uh, they were okay. I wasn't really feeling them that much. And then after them, another woman came in, Miss Volman, who I really liked. But I wasn't sure if I was going to play trumpet. So my last year in middle school, I auditioned for the symphonic band, and thinking, okay, I'll probably be in the concert band because the symphonic band was the top band. Concert band was the a second band, and mainly
Mhm.
freshmen would go into the concert band because you had all these seniors, juniors, and sophomores in the symphonic band. But I made it into the symphonic band, and the band director at my high school, Morrow High School, said, you got something. Don't quit the trumpet. You made it into the symphonic band. You're one of few freshmen that did. So just keep playing, and I think you'll enjoy it. So
Mhm.
took his word, and those 4 years of high school, um, he's probably quintessential to me being a trumpet player because he was such a impact and such a powerful person in my life. Um, and I guess showed me like the expansion of music and what I could do with music and how beautiful music was. I mean, the repertoire we would play in symphonic band, and he led the jazz band too. Like all these sounds I was hearing, all these things he opened me up to, was really, really impactful. Um, and by the time I was a senior, I knew music. I was going to do music full time.
Nice, nice. So you did symphonic band, but you weren't. Were you doing a lot of jazz in high school?
So I started doing jazz around. There was another influential person. He was actually a senior when I was a sophomore. This guy named Mike Brown. He gave me my first like jazz mix CD. Or it wasn't even a CD. I'm sorry, it was a tape. He gave me a tape.
Cassette tape.
That shows how old I am. He gave me a cassette tape, and he had John Coltrane's Blue Train. He had a couple of Lee Morgan tunes. He had Maceo Parker on there, Lou Donaldson. You know, I had never heard any of this music, and once he gave that to me, I went home and like wore that tape out. And so that was kind of my first. It was my sophomore year. That was my first real kind of introduction to jazz music. And after that, it was just like, oh, here's this whole world of all this music that now I had been in the hip hop world for a while, and I was really, really, really trenched in that. And now I had this whole other world of music that I was ready to explore. And so I think my sophomore year, I made it into the jazz band. So from then on, I started listening to and playing jazz.
Okay. And so when you graduated from high school, where did you go for undergraduate?
Yeah, so for undergrad, I went to, me being from Atlanta, I went to Georgia State University.
Okay.
I had a couple of options. I had made it into Berkeley. I had not a full scholarship, but a pretty good scholarship. I'd made it to Oberlin as well. There was another school in there, but two things kept me at Georgia State University. Well, three things. One was Georgia State was free. So scholarships to these places. My parents were like, "You get a free ride at Georgia State," which was great.
Mm-hmm.
Two, the director there, I had an appreciation for him. It turns out he was a really, really tough dude, but so I wanted to go because of the director. And then probably maybe most importantly was I got to stay and study with one of my teachers, one of the first teachers who really instilled the jazz language in me. His name is Danny Harper, one of the Harper brothers. So
okay.
I met him as a senior in high school. He was teaching at this piano shop close to where we lived in Atlanta. And I met him randomly, just like walking in the mall. And he was there. He pulled me in. He's like, "Do you play something?" And I told him I played trumpet. He actually pulled me and my brother as well. And so he was giving lessons, and he was a student of Barry Harris's. So he was giving lessons based on Barry Harris's concept. So senior year, I started taking from him. And then I was, it's a lot to learn with Barry Harris concept. So I was like, oh, I kind of want to stay in the area and study with Danny, and really, really kind of get entrenched in this concept, but also learn more about the trumpet. And Danny was playing really good trumpet at the time. So I stayed and went to Georgia State University for undergrad.
That's great that you hooked up with the Danny. I know the Harper family, is known for, a lot of musicians like, Philip Harper and Winard Harper, and then their nephew, Terrence Harper, who I actually met for the first time this past weekend at Dizzy's. He came and hung out with us. He's a good friend of yours as well, right?
Yeah, I've known Terrence since he was a little kid before he started playing trumpet, and then I've gotten to see him grow into this like monster trumpet player that he is now.
Yeah.
And strong musical family. I also play occasionally with Winard. I used to see Philip. I used to be under Philip all the time when Philip was living in Atlanta, and I was in Atlanta as well. He'd be at the sessions all the time, and just hearing his sound and his flavor, vibe. That was lessons.
That apprenticeship is like it's really great that you came up with that. So how did you end up at Rutgers? How did Rutgers come into play?
Yeah, so after graduating undergrad, I was like, I definitely want to be in New York. I knew I wanted to do that. I had visited New York a couple times. Um, Interestingly enough, Danny Harper had studied with this renowned trumpet player named William Fielder, who we call Prof, who you also studied with as well, right,
Yeah.
Dion? Yeah.
Hmm.
So Danny had studied with Prof, and Danny said, if you want to go up north, this is the guy you need to get in touch with. This is the guy you need to be with. And also, maybe there's an opportunity for you to go and get your master's degree as well. So Prof he flew down to Atlanta to speak with me, and it may have even been Melvin too as well, because Melvin also started going to Rutgers the same year I did. So I think Prof may have met with him in Atlanta at the time. And I had known Melvin right before I moved to New York. I met Melvin. Melvin was living in Atlanta at the time as well.
Hmm.
So Prof came down, gave us a couple lessons. And with Prof, it's not just like a lesson. It's like you're taking him around, you're taking him out to eat, everything. So
It's an adventure.
yeah, it's an adventure. It's an adventure. So I spent some time with him in Atlanta, and he said, "Well, why don't you come up and audition for Rutgers, and see if you can get a scholarship? And I know you want to be in New York. You'll be not too far from New York City." So I came up, auditioned, did pretty well. I didn't know if I did or not because Prof was so hard, and so rigid. But it turns out I did pretty good. I got a scholarship as well, and started going to Rutgers. And then I started my master's degree. It was coming up in 2000, I believe. Yep, 2000.
Okay, so you attended Rutgers, Melvin and Sean Jones. The three of you guys were there at the same time.
Yeah, so we I still remember the day I met Sean, because Melvin and I had known each other from Atlanta. So we came up, we were in the same dorm, um, and we were kind of hanging out. And we had heard about Sean. We had heard some tapes from or some CDs or some recordings of Sean from Prof as well. We were like, "Who is this guy?" We were really, really excited and interested to meet him. And then Melvin and I were driving, and we kind of pulled up, and we saw this guy I think he had like a fedora with like a feather in it or something like that. And he was wearing, this loud shirt and doing his thing. And we were like, that's gotta be Sean right there. So we knew it was him. So we came up to him and said, "What's up?" We started talking, and immediately pulled our horns out and started playing just in the middle of our dorm, playing, you know. And that's when I got to hear the excellence and true genius of Sean Jones. And I'll never forget that day hearing him play trumpet and being like, "Where the hell is this dude? Where the hell did this dude come from? And like, who is he?"
Right.
Playing magnificently then as well too. And and then we lived together. We were in the dorms for a year, and then me, Melvin, and Sean moved in together, and so we got to work it out every day together. Really like feeding from each other. Sean always says I was the guy who had the harmony because I was really into harmony. Studying the Barry Harris method and that to Woody Shaw to everybody. Sean had this technical prowess that we all wanted as well. So we really got an opportunity to feed off each other. And Melvin had like kind of both. He was great technically, and he also had some harmony as well too. So it was really, really awesome living with those two guys.
It's really funny because I know all three of you guys, and I've worked with all three of you in different situations. And every time I bring up you guys being roommates, it's interesting to hear how y'all talk about each other. And each one of y'all say, "No, man, he was the cat. He was the cat." And Melvin was, "He was the cat." And Sean is like, "No, Melvin was the cat."
Yeah. It was like that too, because we all had kind of our we all had our thing. We fed off each other, and
Do you think that Prof put you guys together by design?
You know what? I will say this: we were the only. I mean, there were a couple other Black people, I think, but we were the only three that were really in the jazz department. I think there was maybe one or two other guys as well too. But
Mm.
you know, it was like most universities, you know, like I think they would take a couple of, and you know, I don't want to go down the road of like, you know,
Right.
all
Yeah.
that. But you know, you rarely see a university say like, "Oh, we've got these three guys, and we're going to take them, these three black men, and we're going to take them and put them in a jazz band." Um, I don't know. At that time, I don't feel like I feel like it was by design. I feel like Prof said, "Those three, we got to have them." You know,
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
everybody that was auditioning as well too. So yeah. So let me, before I like put my foot in my mouth, let me end it right there of saying like, yeah, yeah,
No, but it's great because you know Prof was known for recruiting really talented students.
yep.
You know, I went there for my undergraduate, which I did music education,
Oh,
and
okay.
I think I may have been the only black in the music education program at that time. Everybody thought I was a jazz major because that's where all
Yeah,
the you know the black students were in the jazz program, but I wasn't. I was in the music education program, and then when I went and did my master's, I did it in jazz studies. You know,
yeah,
so but I think you know I was you know meeting you guys is just really it just says a lot. I mean, a lot of great musicians have come through Rutgers program. Kenny Davis, Orrin Evans,
yeah,
and David Sanchez was there for a minute. Adam Cruz on the drums was there for a minute. Lafayette Harris was there.
yeah,
Frank Lacey, Michael Philip Mossman,
yeah,
Ferris Blanchard, Ralph Peterson. I mean, a lot of great musicians have come through that program, you know, and a lot of them had to do with Prof. I ended up there because of Prof. I had no idea who Prof was, but a gentleman in St. Thomas knew of my talent and was like, you know, you should go to the school. And that's how I ended up going to Rutgers. After hearing the Rutgers jazz faculty, they used to travel, the Rutgers jazz professors. It was interesting group. I was in ninth grade. They came to the Virgin Islands.
oh,
It was Larry Ridley on bass, Kenny
okay.
Barron on piano, Ted Dunbar on guitar, Frank Foster on sax, and Philly Joe Jones on drums.
Billy Joe, wow,
I
wow,
was 14 years old in ninth grade, and I heard jazz, traditional jazz, for the first time,
yeah,
and I was blown away. I had no idea what they was playing, but it made sense. It was like I was like, "Wow, this is, you know, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life," and that's how I ended up at Rutgers. Dr. Lawrence McClellan, who at
okay,
the time was the chair of the music department at the University of the Virgin Islands, but he brought them down there to do a concert. And I met, you know, I knew him and he mentored me and he encouraged me to go to Rutgers. But it was one of the best decisions I've made because it was such a great school, you know.
yeah. You know, so much. You're right, so much talent, and you know, when I found out about Rutgers and Prof asked me to audition, I did a lot of research, and I was like, "It's a lot of people who've come through here."
Yeah,
And you're right, Prof was really like he was the jazz messenger or the jazz educator. You know,
yeah,
he
yeah,
wanted he wanted to, and I think it's because he really got to study with the cats, and the cats were not easy with him. You know, he has stories of when he met Dizzy Gillespie, has stories when he met Lee Morgan, you know, and like all these guys, and how, you know, how much they were, how strong they were about the music, and how they wanted him to be, you know, excellent in the music. So he
mm,
passed that down, and I think he wanted everybody. And he
yeah.
was a prof. He wanted nothing but excellence.
He was all about excellence. He's a great educator. I took an independent study with Prof. It was funny. I, I I don't even know how I ended up taking this independent study, but I all we did was piano, and he sat me down. And he's like, "These are the voices for two fives. When I see you next week, know them." And I came back and I knew them, and he would show me a little bit every weekend. And again, it wasn't just about that. It's like, okay, let's go to the calf, and then you know he would give me a record to listen to. Tell me what you heard, who's on the tracks, and it was just constant information, knowledge. He was drilling you all the time. It was never any downtime with him. And if you was gonna hang around him, you were gonna learn something. You
Yeah,
know, yeah. That's how it was all the time. And that's why I asked if it was by design because I know, I know at the time, he's a very calculating person the way he taught, but it was always for the good of the student.
yeah. It was definitely always for the good of the student.
Yeah,
You know,
always for the good of the student. And he found a way to bring the best out. I mean, it wasn't easy with Prof, and we didn't have a lot. My first year with Prof was not a pleasant year.
Yeah.
We was not a pleasant year at all. We
He
it
only
eventually turned pleasant.
Yeah, I think we played each lesson because we weren't getting that one note right. I think for the first 6 months, I only played one note in a
Yeah.
lesson. He would be like, nope, that's not it. Then he would drill me again, and I couldn't get that one note. He wanted that articulation. He wanted that snap, so he
Well, you
was,
figured it out, and you got many notes happening now.
well, he
But,
was still learning to, till rest in peace, till the day he passed away. He was coming up with more concepts and more concepts. He came out with a concept, really talking about how whistling is related to the trumpet. No one was really talking about that.
mhm,
Years later, I'm like, oh, I know I know exactly what he means. There's a
mhm.
correlation between whistling and playing the trumpet, So he was he was still learning even up to the day he passed away.
Oh yeah.
Still, yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, we could talk about Prof forever, about the stories and the one
Yeah.
of the. I mean, real quick, I would just share this. One of the things I appreciated that a lot of the elder musicians like the Freddie Hubbards and those guys are former. They would come down to Rutgers
Mm.
and spend time with him. I mean, take lessons. Some of them did, but I enjoyed Prof. I would have a class with me. Say, meet me 8 o'clock tonight or 6 o'clock in my office. Dress nice, and I'll show up. He's like, let's go to the city, and we'll just go hear these cats play and just hang out till 4 in the morning. And he knew everybody.
Man,
And,
I saw a Freddie Hubbard. I took Prof to see Freddie Hubbard, and Freddie finished his first set, and then Freddie came down to Prof. He's like, Prof, like, he was kind of going through his chop thing. Then he was like, what can I do? What do I need to do?
mm,
Like, to fix these situations and stuff. And it was like, Prof was like, man, he was the man. He was the man.
oh yeah, he definitely held his own, and we haven't even talked about Prof with the classical component as yet either. That's another conversation, but
Yeah, we could
that's
speak.
what he was teaching at Rutgers as well. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, we're just talking about the jazz component, but he was teaching all the classical cats there as well.
I mean, I'll tell you, we studied was more classical training than jazz. We had our occasional where we would talk about harmony and stuff, but I think at the point, not that we still had a lot to learn, but me, Melvin, and Sean were really steeped into harmony and tradition. So it wasn't that we just wanted to really get that. How do you play the trumpet with that sound that Prof
Right.
was getting? We
Yeah.
picked his brain.
That's that's great, man. That's great. But just in the essence of time, I know there's a couple other things I wanted to ask you before we get into some music. But so you left Rutgers, you went on the road. Tell us briefly some of the folks that you played with, because I know you were on the road a lot with Maceo, but you played with some other great musicians that still do. But can you share with us some of the musicians you've worked with?
Yeah, so probably one of my first like big jazz artist I worked with was Illinois Jacquet, which was kind of like a rite of passage as well. I know a lot of musicians, especially musicians, came out of Rutgers, also went to Illinois Jacquet's band and played, and it was intense, but really good learning experience. And then I had the opportunity to meet Clark Terry, and interestingly enough, I met him because he had a hospital appointment he needed to go to, and at the time, drummer Jerome Jennings was kind of like helping him, go to his appointments and stuff, and so he couldn't make one. He's like, "Well, I want you to meet this trumpet player, though," and so I got to meet Clark Terry and like take him to the hospital, and then I got to study with him, and so one of the other gigs I got to do is I got to play in his band, and I did this one tour where I was playing some, but I was also taking care of him because he needed some help, So I was
Okay.
kind of like, for lack of a better word, orderly, but also like doing some playing. And in the middle of this one tour, we were in Seattle. I remember getting a call, and it was from this guy Mike Phillips, who I'd also toured with, incredible saxophone player, and he called me to play with Prince. So I left. I talked to Clark Terry and his wife, and I said, this is a huge opportunity. You guys mind if I leave this tour? And I got their blessing, and they were like, yeah, you can't miss this opportunity. So I
Right.
went to Vegas and started playing with Prince, and did about a 2.5 year stint with Prince.
Nice.
And then in addition to, through Prince, I met Maceo Parker, and I was able to play with Maceo Parker off and on for about 10 years. That was one of the last concerts I did before the pandemic, was with Maceo Parker at the Blue Note. But in addition to him, I did, a lot of hip hop stuff. I was with Jay-Z for a while, with Jill Scott. I worked with the Jonas Brothers, so kind of pop, hip hop stuff. I was also doing my own group, Pursuance, which is a mix of jazz, hip hop, and soul, things of
Mm-hmm.
that nature. So, I got to do a lot of touring. So, was on the road for about 15 to 16 years.
Yeah.
With Marcus Miller as well, who was really, really influential. Worked with him for 4 years, and it was a really defining time of my life, and I really learned a lot from him. Probably one of the best musicians and bosses that I've had, being on the road. So it was really great working with Marcus.
Nice, nice. Well, I mean, you've really played with some heavyweights, and again, because again, I would hear your name, and I was like, well, where's Lee? And, man, he lives on the road. He's like, you were never in town. You was always on the road,
Yeah.
doing something, which is great, man. And it wasn't until fast forward to after the pandemic, I think, was like the first time we really got to play.
Yeah. I was thinking, because um, I think DJ was around 8 years old when I gave him. So it might have been right before the pandemic that we met in
Before we did the gig in St. Croix.
St. Croix. Yep.
Yeah, that was before. It was before the pandemic. I think I was like 20,
Yeah.
19 or 20, no, 19, 18 or 19, somewhere
Yeah.
2018 or 2019. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did that gig in St. Croix. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Because
I was living in Midtown, because I remember DJ would come to our apartment in Midtown.
that's right. That's right.
2018.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you came down and you was a guest artist with my university big band.
Yeah. Which was
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, it was around 18, 19, around that time. Yeah. Nice, nice. Man, time flies.
Time flies. I know. I know. Time flies. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just finished up as the director of Harlem School of the Arts as well, right? You were there
Yeah.
for a while.
I was in an admin role. I was actually overseeing the education. My actual title, which doesn't really matter, but it was Chief Education Officer, which basically meant I was overseeing all of the arts programming. So, although I have a music background, in this role, I also had to oversee theater, I had to oversee dance, I had to oversee our media design program, and musical theater as well. And I worked with the directors who led each one of those departments, and really learned a lot. Um, the directors of each department were really, really skilled in what they did, and I got really embedded in some of these different art forms. Particularly dance. A really exceptional dance program at Harlem School of the Arts, led by Leland Simmons,
Mhm.
and so I really got to learn a lot more outside of music, and just learn about what it means to manage, and what it means to um, you know create budgets, put together curriculum, all these things, in each one of those different departments. So it was really challenging but rewarding, and being able to work at Harlem School of the Arts, which has this incredible history and legacy. People like Lenny Kravitz, Giancarlo Esposito, uh, Dorothy Maynard being the founder, like so many great people came out of that.
Mhm.
So it was an honor to actually oversee the education program.
Great. How many years were you there?
I was there 3 years. I was there for
3 years.
3 years. Yep.
Nice.
Prior to that, I worked at Jazz House Kids, which was another learning experience working with Melissa, and she's and her husband Christian McBride as well,
Mhm.
Melissa Walker, and working with them. And I was the director there during the pandemic, so we had to learn how to teach these kids, during the virtual era. So we were doing ensembles, we were doing fundraisers, everything virtually. So learned a lot with that as well.
Nice, nice. So now you're not at the Harlem School of the Arts. You kind of back with your solo career and
Yeah.
doing that. So, um, what are you up to these days? What's on the agenda for Lee?
Yeah, so like being that kid that was always into like hip hop music production and composition, I'll say in general, because when I went to undergrad, I took, a good amount of composition classes and a graduate school as well, and have always been a fan of composition. Before the pandemic, I got into music licensing. So basically, I was able to work with some music licensing company, a couple of music licensing companies, create music and um, support brands like Levi's, like Toyota, support these brands with music. And, it really fed into my creativeness in terms of composition and trying to get things to sound, really good, and just really wanting to hone in on that craft. And
Mhm.
and it was good money. So I was like, oh, this could be a path, like I love
Right.
touring, but I know that, there's there's um there's things that are difficult with touring. Like if you have a family, I was about to have a family,
Right.
be on the road, those type of things. So I delved into that before the pandemic. Pandemic hit, kind of backed away a little bit. It was still doing some of that work. But then, last year I thought, well, this is my opportunity to really dive back into composition and really try uh, to see how I can work that field and be back creative again. I mean, being an administrator was really a great opportunity and challenging, but I felt like I
It's time.
I felt it was time for me. I mean, there's people who've done it for way longer than I have, and I like have such a appreciation for them. But it was time for me to go back. So I started my own company called Willie Ho Music, and now the idea is that we support brands or TV, film, music companies with high quality music.
Great, great. Well, man, it's really interesting to hear your story. It's really an interesting path. You've done all the touring, the administration, the education. I mean, that's kind of what cats do. They go to school, they want to
Yeah,
go on the road, and then eventually get a teaching job type of stuff. But then you have this other feather in your cap that taking this leap and say, hey, man, I'm gonna jump back in
yeah.
this pool and just do my thing again, which I really admire, man. That's great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely a leap of faith, and anything with music, I think, obviously it's the love that keeps us doing it because it's not easy. It's a challenge, whether you're doing education, whether you're on the road, whether you're doing licensing. It's a challenge, so it's
Hmm.
all about love, you gotta love it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
that being said, man, you shared some of your music with us, which I think is incredible. I've heard your music before, but you shared some stuff, and I just want to jump into that right now and
yeah,
let our audience hear some of the music behind the talent of Lee Hogans. So, if you don't mind,
yeah.
the first song you shared, let's play it first, and then we could talk about it afterwards. The
Okay.
first song you shared is Lee Hogans, "The Groove," the old groove.
Yeah.
So let's check it out.
All right.
Yeah. So somebody's asking if you did this on an album 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was. This album came out about 2014. Yep. So
Okay.
about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago.
Okay. Okay. Groove is called. So what's the concept behind that? I mean, besides it grooving.
Yeah, so you probably noticed that clubs towards the end of the video, there's a club in the West Village called Club Groove. So that club used to show us love. We would go there. We had a month. We would do maybe a couple every other week. We'd do a set there. We had kind of a residency every other week, and we loved it. That was like one of the places where we got to try a lot of the different arrangements I was coming up with. And at that time, I knew I really wanted to do this amalgamation of like hip hop and jazz and soul. You know,
Right.
the club was the spot we would do it at. You know, so I decided to write this tune and name it after that. We got to record it at the club as well. We're outside the club and everything. So that was the basis of coming up with that song. The club groove is still there, like still doing its thing, and like so many people have gone through, have passed through those doors. Prince, I heard, was there. To like, you know, all these famous people came in and have played at that place. So
Okay. Nice. So Jerome is on drums. Who else is in the band? Yeah.
Jerome is on drums. There's Misha Josephs is on guitar. Anya Christine Nilsson is on trumpet. Kellen Harrison is on bass. And Jesse Fisher, who's an incredible pianist, is actually playing piano, but he couldn't make the video, so he's not on the video. It's another incredible pianist named David Jobert, but Jesse Fisher's the one who is playing.
Okay.
So yeah.
Great, beautiful, man. I'm enjoying this, and it's good to hear Jerome just laying out some pocket too. I mean, I know he's good for it, but it's good to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he swings. You know, he's playing with the best of the best. But
yeah, great, man.
Also lay down that pocket. Yep.
Great. I'm enjoying this, man. So the next song you shared is it's called Hustler's Anthem Remix.
Yeah. So on that album in 2014, I have a song called Hustler's Anthem. You know, the basis of the song is dedicated to people in New York City who are hustling, who are grinding, whether you're doing music, whether you're doing whatever, you know, like New York City has that hustle and grind mentality. So I wrote that song, Hustler's Anthem, for New York. And then I was like, hey, you know, the original one had kind of like a more jazz, kind of soul kind of thing. And I was like, let me call my boy, Silent Night, who's probably one of the best MCs that I know, you know, and has a long, long history of recording and still recording. I said, hey, can we take this song? Can we do a remix of it? So we decided to do a remix, and here it is.
Okay. I'm interested in check. I mean, I've heard all of it, but I'm let's check it out. Hustler's Anthem.
Up, head straight to my to-do list. Before I'm even lucid, I'm just used to it. Bump a couple beats before I brush my teeth. I would write all day if it was up to me. But see, I gotta hit these emails stat. About 3 or 4 calls, a meeting on top of that. No rabbit out the hat shit, but at times it is magic. Mess around and get a hat trick. Multitasking, not just the rap or the jazz thing, it's the city. Whether you buskin' or bustin' tables, if you young and able, gotta jump up on the payroll. Incredible caseload, leave a civilian with their face froze. But it's a regular day, what else more can I say? It's the hustler's anthem. And you say New York City, stay busy. And you say New York City, yes. And you say hustle, work, crime, move, build, push, go, show, prove, focus, plan, dream, do, get up, get out, get something. What we do is we hustle. push, go, show, prove, focus, plan, dream, do, get up, get out, get something, what we do is we hustle like you never seen, survival above everything, cause you ain't trying to keep the same routine. Really it's about veteran, questioning, self-doubt, second nature, independent and major, basically still a wager. The behavior and the balancing act of a working artist in their natural habitat. You know, like concrete goes with jungles. We just trying to eat like the ones amongst you, not trying to compete or be flex a muscle. It's like pH, you say we on a Brussels. New York City, the raw gritty, the pure, the salt, really the strong, the awful and the awesome, all along with the Lord willing. We all winning, it's the hustlers in. And you say New York City, say, stay busy, yeah. And you say New York City, come on. And you say, come on, stay busy, hustle, work, grind, move, build, push, prove, focus, plan, dream, do, get up, get out, get something, what we do is we hustle, work, grind, move, build, push, go, show, prove, focus, plan, dream, do, get up, get out, get something, what we do is we hustle, work, grind, move, build, push, go, show, prove, focus, plan, dream, do, come on, get up, get out, get something, what we do is we hustle, work, grind, move, build, push, go, come on, focus, plan, dream, do, get up, get out, get something, what we do is we hustle.
I love Jazz Hop's fusion of elements of jazz and hip hop. You nailed it.
Thank you, Maurice Gonzalez. Appreciate that.
Can hear echoes of Dizzy's. Yeah, man.
Man, that's always a compliment. Dizzy's one of my favorite trumpet players of all time. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Hustlers anthems. Yeah, man. So you know what I like about that, I mean, is like it has like the comment just mentioned, all the elements, all the jazz, all the hip hop, all the, you know, it's really nice harmonic changes too. It's like when you listen to, you know, a hip hop song, is like the harmony is very limited. If you know, if there's really harmony there, but this is really nice. I'm enjoying it.
But that's, you know, that's what really cut, you know, when I was listening to hip hop, and especially in the 90s when it started becoming kind of more jazz sample based, they would take these elements, you know, and they probably didn't know what chord changes they were taking or whatever, but they would put them together and they'd make these like sounds. And that was my introduction to like, oh, this is this jazz harmony. You know, sometimes they put two songs together that were in the same key, but it worked. So
yeah,
it opened up my ears. So I was, you know, when I started doing it, I was like, I want to make sure I have that harmonic element as well, not just the groove, you know.
Yeah. Well, no, it's happening. It's in there, and it's fresh. You know, what year was this?
So I think that one was 2000. That video came out maybe 2017, I think, but the song had been out for about a year or two before that, 2015, I think. So yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I'm enjoying it, man. Beautiful stuff. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah,
so leads into the next song. So we kind of know what's in your subconscious mind.
Yeah. So you know,
subconsciously.
The song actually is from the famous Lee Konitz, and I got to meet Lee Konitz once when I was hanging out with Clark Terry. We were somewhere. I think we were somewhere in Manhattan, and we were crossing the street about to go into this restaurant, and Lee Konitz just runs and is like, Clark Terry, or he might have called him CT, which is what we called him. And, you know, he comes and starts talking to him, and I got to meet Lee Hogans. And at that time, I was really into his music, into, you know, him, Warren Marsh, Lenny Tristano, you know, that whole kind of scene of music. So, and I love that song. So I was like, you know, what if I do that song and then put a little bit of like a, you know, high life, kind of like an African vibe to it. So I called my boy up, Biscuit, who is an incredible drummer, James Rouse. We call him Biscuit. And I said, can you put the Tony Allen thing on? He said, yep. So we decided to do another mesh. This time we got, you know, more high life, kind of like Afro beat / jazz mixed into one song.
All right. Well, let's check it out. Subconsciously. Subconsciously is extraordinary. Nice. Smooth jazz with an edge. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Definitely the Tony Allen vibe in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing with Marcus Miller, I had the opportunity to record on his Aphrodisia album, and it was all about you know that high life sound, Fela Kuti, all that kind of influence. So I was really hearing it, and got to play with a lot of African musicians when I was with Marcus Miller, and these incredible musicians would come in and like perform, and we do, an amalgamation of like jazz and that type of music as well. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, we have one more song. Let's just jump right into this because time is not our friend right now.
Yeah.
I want to get this last song in because it's a great song. Let's play it and we could talk about it briefly after. This is entitled Black James Bond.
God's mission. You can feel the stress, there's an odd tension. It don't matter what the condition. This separates the weak from the strong like a partition. This ain't for the faint of heart. This ain't for them loudmouth clowns trying to play the part. See, I was called on by the kings. They wear jewels in their crowns and a lot of rings. They said something had been stolen from a time when the era was golden. Now it's my job to get it back. It wouldn't feel right sitting back, cause it was valuable beyond measure. So now I gotta find this darn treasure. See, what they stole belongs to us, and there's no error as strong as us. And I know if I take this mission, I can bring it back to a great condition. But I might not make it home, but I'ma risk it all to take it home and bring it back to its proper place. There's a whole lot to stop and face, and evil force trying to stand against me. They're not as strong, you can't convince me. I'm concerned, but I'm so determined. Even without balance, will never fall. You're looking at a rebel, that should pay me double. If I was in trouble, then you better call.
Yeah, that sounds like a theme song for some movie, bro.
So I'm a 70s baby, I mean, late 70s, but, I had to do something like that sounded 70s-ish, and then, we're supposed to have a Black James Bond by now. We haven't had a Black James Bond. So I was like, first of all, I've always wanted to do animation. And I was able to talk to Master Ace, who, by the way, is the MC and storyteller on there. He's like one of the hip hop's legends. Hip hop would not be what it is without Master Ace. So I was working with him at the time, and we got to meet through the Blue Note, because the Blue Note was doing these concerts where they would take some of the hip hop legends, and pair them with jazz groups. So my group got to back up a lot of hip hop legends, and really was able to gain a friendship with Master Ace, who's probably one of the most incredible storytellers. But I told him I want to do like an animation video, and I had just seen him in an animation video. This guy named Taylor Bowen, who has a studio called House Riot, does the animations, and he does it for hip hop musicians. I asked, Master Ace, can you put me in touch with him? He's told me he'd do the video, and Master Ace would join as well. So video was able to come to fruition. I'm so happy that I get to be a part of an animation. Always wanted to be, and now I'm in an animated video. So
nice. Beautiful. I love it, man. I love it. Well, man, great music, man. From Black James Bond to Subconscious Lee, Hustler's Anthem, and Groove. Thank you for sharing your music with us. We're out of time, but before you leave, let our audience know how they can follow you on the social media.
Yeah. You can follow me. So my website is Willie Ho Music. That's WILEEHO music.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Lee Hogans, on Facebook, Lee Hogans as well, on Bandcamp, Lee Hogans, on Spotify, Lee Hogans. I have a couple of albums out and some singles as well. iTunes as well. Just look up Lee Hogans, you'll see me.
Great. Yeah. Beautiful, man. Well, Lee, it's been a pleasure having you, man. Catching up stories, man. We haven't seen each other in a minute. Now it's like, twice in less than 4 days.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, Dion. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing my music too and my story.
Yes, sir, man. Thank you again, man. Lee, it's been a pleasure, man. We wish you all the best, continued success to you and your family, and we'll, hope to have you back soon. We have a lot more to talk about.
Awesome. See you soon.
All right. Take care. Yes, that was the great Lee Hogans sharing his experiences with us and all the great things he's been doing as well as his music. So we thank Lee for that. Come back and join me next week as we have the great Nasa Abede joining us, drummer extraordinaire, one of my heroes. I met him when I was a teenager, and we're still in communication to this day. And he's holding down the fort down in the D.C., Maryland area, educating the kids down there, performing, swinging, doing his thing, man. So come back and join us next week as we have Mr. Abede on Sounds of the Diaspora with us. You guys take care. All the best. Thank you for joining me.